on July 11th, and we're just talking about,
July the 2nd.
Today's date.
Oh, I'm sorry, my son.
So we're just talking about July 2nd, about going into Normandy and going in on the ship and that gentleman you met that had a lot more experience than you.
Yes.
So carry on from there.
And we landed it pretty well. Hardly had any water on the wheels of the truck and the armored cars and everything else. I said, anyway, when the ramp went down, and we had been 3 months waterproofing all the vehicles. Never needed any of it at all.
And waterproofing, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's a compound that they kind of a putty compound that you got to put over all of your connectors. You got to take your mufflers and extend on them, and have floating tailpipes, and all of the spark plugs and distributors have to all be coated with this here compound, and where the gas fill levers are, that all has to be waterproofed, so that if you go into 6 feet of water, your vehicle won't stall it. You can continue ashore. But what we had to do, we had to go right into where we had built this here unit for the regiment to camp in.
Yes.
We could only allowed to go 3 miles with that compound on, because the motors would heat up something fierce, you know.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I had to get all that gunk off. Well, brother, there was some old slimy stuff. It's like called a Carkin compound. It's a putty. You've seen it. They use it on nowadays on when you're doing electrical work around the standpipe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you see it filled in there. Yeah.
Right.
Duck seal.
Duck seal, yeah.
Duck seal.
We call it pipe dope down there.
Yeah. And all that had to be taken off now. You had a full 2 or 3 days taking that off. Anyway, the battle for Capercailloux Airport was just about to take place, and the Regiment de Chaudière, French regiment, and they were in the 3rd Div, and we were coming ashore. We were the 2nd Div, and we were going to take over from the 3rd Div, and that had to be a calculated way of doing that. These regiments and units had been in the lines for a long time, and had suffered a lot of casualties and a lot of trauma. So we had to relieve them. But anyway, the Fort Garry Horse were there at the edge of there, and then with the Fort Garry Horse and ourselves, we went in behind them, like a mop-up type thing.
Right.
And as they continued to cross the airport, now an airport is something to try to take. There's slit trenches all the place, and you've got armored guards you can't hide, the tanks you can't hide. But the tanks used to go across there and start lamming away at them. And then if they got to a trench that didn't cave in, didn't give up, why they just turned the tank on it at that time, and went and squashed them right down into the thing. You get up and give up or whatever, you know.
So let's go back to the beach and getting onto the beach. You went in at D+12, was it?
No, it was D plus 20, I guess.
D plus 20.
Yeah.
So the beach had already been established, of course. And
yes,
talk
but there's
about that a little bit.
still bodies and everything else floating in the head and tide, and there's still lots of prisoners standing around and things like that. And there's
actually still bodies still in the water.
Oh yes, there's still bodies floating
from D-Day.
Yeah. Well, what had happened a lot of times that they didn't have enough time to get them all yet, or they were up the tide up above, or somebody wasn't operating, and these bodies were floating down, or bodies that had been on the body are just coming up now. Sometimes bodies go down,
right,
and they're 5 or 6 days down before they come back up again,
right,
and things like that. It's quite a, and you can hear all the bombs and see all the smoke and and the barrage balloons and the ships for miles and miles.
So you knew you were in World War II at that time.
Yes, sir, you did that. There's no illusions as to where you were and what was going to happen, you know what I mean? But we started moving inland quite readily, quickly, and then got all that waterproofing off, and then we were to take part to try to help out in the Capercailloux Airport reduction.
So you're in it right now. You're in the war at that time, weren't you?
And of course, we're following the Fort Garry Horse tanks in.
Okay.
They're the ones that are actually up there doing the firing and one thing. Some of them on fire too. But and all we were doing was when Jerry's would start to run or something like that, or be behind the tanks, that's what we were doing, cleaning up that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we were about a day and a half there, and we finally harbored in the air hangars. They were all beat to hell, I tell you. part. There was nothing you could fire a cannon through them any time at all. And we parked all our vehicles in these, and it was at that point there was one of the bunkers on the airport there that they had an awful job trying to get them out. Now these bunkers were firing from slits, but to get into the bunker you had to go downstairs like this in a trench, like concrete, down like that. And when you went down the stairs, there was two slits like this where they'd fire at you while you were going down, and a big steel door down there. And they did everything in the world to try to get them out of there. And this one shoddy air fella come over to me and asked me if I had any gas, and I had a 5-gallon jerry can full of gas. He took it over and he knocked off the ventilator up top and poured the 5 gallons of gas down and put a match down. There was bodies came out.
They're coming out then, weren't they?
Oh, they had been using it for a first aid post, but that fight fine. But he wanted the first aid post and put a flag on it or something like that so we don't shoot at you. But they came out. Oh boy, did they ever come out. There's a Moji Bosch. I remember swearing in French at the Germans, the dirty bastard Germans.
What did you think of the Chartiers?
They're a good, hard regiment, mind you, but they were good. They were all right, yeah. So when you look at the context of the French to English relationship nowadays, this business of making a country bilingual is, I think, is the stupidest thing that was ever put there. It was all very well, let them speak their French and let us speak our English, but don't make any of it mandatory, you know. Yeah. And you turn one against the other. And after that, Trudeau turned that against, from then on, you against us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we against ye. It turned the whole country inside out. But you take Belgium, the Flams and the Walloons. They've been at it each other's for 700 years. You know, it just don't work. Everybody's right. Yeah, that's it. But anyway.
So you're in that, the Germans out of the bunker?
No, I seen a couple come out, and one of them was on fire, and they doused him, tried to get him out. I don't know what happened to him. But I remember we were in harbored into the airdrome there. We were in the hangars and one thing and another, and we parked all of the stuff that we had dug in outside was all now scrapped. We were now in the hangars with all of our cookers doing all of that, and we were there for a day and a half, and I was out in the field and going down. There was slit trenches there with bodies in it, sitting there, facing each other with mess in their hand and one thing and another, and I jumped down in to get some Lugers and one thing and another, and I got one off this one guy there, and all of a sudden this batch of airplanes came over, and there was 6 of them or 5 of them, and 4 of them were chasing another one, and we didn't know that was happening. We just thought it was a flight of German planes coming over. And this Fort Garry horse fellow sergeant, they had one of the tanks is done up with twin Oerlikons on it, and the turret's taken off and these twin Oerlikons are on it, and you sit in it, quad Oerlikons, four Oerlikons pacing up like that, and he spun her right around, and the first one he shot down, I'll tell you, and it was a Spitfire. He was being chased by the other guys. But then,
shot down his own guy.
Yeah, he shot down the Spitfire. Then the other, he took the tail off the next one, the wing off another one, and he hit the third one. It exploded, and the fourth one, it just scooted the heck out of the way. But when the Spitfire ejected, parachuted out,
right,
and he was coming down, and we sent a carrier out to get him. And when he seen the carrier coming, he'd never seen a carrier before in his life, and he didn't know what side of the Oran River he was on.
Right.
And he dove into the river and swam to the other side. We watched the Germans take him prisoner.
Oh my God!
There's some days you shouldn't get out of bed.
No kidding, comedy of errors.
Yeah. And we watched them being taken prisoner. Well. However, such is life in a wheelbarrow. But anyway, during that going on, I was down in this trench with this fella sitting there between the two, listening to all this going on overhead, and all of a sudden one guy emitted some air, like, and I kind of thought he was still alive. But, oh boy, I got out of that quick.
Yeah, you stepped out there quick.
I got a Luger out of it anyway.
Yeah.
The things you do, I tell you, you learn fast. Yes, you either learn fast or you don't learn at all. It's as simple as that.
You're dead.
Yeah. We were there for 3 days, and we parked our vehicles completely. We were suddenly being taken out of the scouting role. Now, we're a very flexible regiment. We're infantry trained and all of that, everything. And our next job was to go into a place called La Messinelle, La Messinelle. And we went in at night at about 11 o'clock. We left in column route up towards the front line, and we could hear the front line and fighting getting closer and closer, and see the things. And we were going to relieve a regiment, and don't know what the regiment it was. It was a Black Watch. They were our division. But anyway, 3rd Division Infantry Regiment. We're going to relieve them, and we're traveling along. We're supposed to have a couple of guides to take us to where we're supposed to go into an apple orchard. And instead of making a left turn up to the apple orchard, we kept right on going. And all of a sudden, we bumped right into the Germans. Up goes a flare and everything, chaos and all. Everything and everybody scattered to the sides and here. Now you can imagine a full regiment in line there and all mixed up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, you never saw chaos like that in your life.
How many people in a regiment? How many soldiers?
Well, about 800 to 900.
Right.
Yeah, if it was a whole thing there.
Yeah.
Like headquarters might not have been there. But anyway, they were trying to sort it out and they're trying to get it turned around and get back the other way. And then finally the officer said, "Sergeants, grab 10 men, whoever you are. Grab 10 men and keep them. Don't care whose they are. Take them and go. You know, and stop this trying to sort them out.
Yeah.
We'll do that in the morning." And that's the only way they got any order to it at all. They got the sergeant would take 10 men and they'd go back to the intersection and the guide would take them up. And I remember taking me up there and he said, "Jump down in there." I said, "Where?" "That hole in the ground in front of you." "Is there anything in it?" He says, "I don't know. Jump down and find out." Welcome aboard. And you know, like it's 3 o'clock in the morning. 3 o'clock in the morning, it's kind of an airy thing, your first thing. But we went in and relieved that regiment totally. They pulled them back and took 6 days with them. They had 6 days back out of the lines, and they organized themselves, reinforced them, got a good bath, and the bath unit follows right up to them, and they have all bath and take all their clothing off on one side, then pass in, have a shower, and get new clothing on the other side, and away they go again. And that's the way it is. That's the way the extermination camps used to operate too, by the way. When they leave on a convoy, go to the other one, all your clothing comes off on this side, you have a shower, go through the showers, and you pick up your clothing on the other side, and you go on to the camp. And then the last one, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was one there we relieved, and then 6 days later, we were called upon to relieve another regiment. They were pulling out of line. We were going in and take over for that one, and that was at Ifs, Iffs, Ifs, and that was just south of Caen a little bit, out to the west of Caen, Caprica Airport, and that one we went in on artificial moonlight. Artificial moonlight is when they take the big searchlights behind us and shine them up to the low cast sky, and reflects off onto the battlefield. Everything is eerie, isn't it eerie?
Yeah.
And you're walking along in the dark. And some guy said, "Well, that's a good thing they letting the Germans see us." And another guy said, "No, it's a good thing the Germans can't hide." You know, one of those, you never know whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah.
But this artificial moonlight, and we marched till about 3 in the morning till we come to this place on a kind of a knoll of a hill, and we relieved that regiment. And then the next one was about 6 days later, we relieved another outfit on the Beauvier Farms, which I've been back and seen, and it's rolling countryside. And we were on one slope here like this, and the Germans could see us from the other side, and they were over on the other slope. But between us and the Germans, there was a road went this way, and just beyond that road there was a minefield that we had laid when we had that ground, and we had fallen back that far, and that was the first time we were ever strafed or bombed. That night about 11 o'clock, the Germans came over, dropped a few flares right over top of us, and they had some kind of a hodgepodge, a couple of Hankels and a couple of Stukas, and what a mess of stupid looking plane. But they were bombing and strafing us like there was no tomorrow. And everybody else had never dug their slit trenches. I had a slit trench already there, and I was a real artist when it came to slit trenches. I loved them. Anyway, and I got into this trench, and I started looking like I can make an L to that trench. So I went on back, maybe about 100 feet. There was a barn that had been shattered with bombs, and I got a piece of a door, I come on back and I put the piece of door over this trench, and I started digging an L to it, put it all on top of that door.
Right.
And I made a beautiful L trench, and then I've cut little holes in it for me missed it and all that. Anyway, and the guys could never understand why I spent so much time on it. But anyway, just then this air raid took place, and half of them didn't have slit trenches. You never even bothered to dig them. And they're all in mine. I think there was 11 in that trench with me.
All squeezed in.
And we're all squeezed. My back is up against the top of that plank and board. And I were singing and roll out the barrel at the top of our lungs because of that. When that whistling from the bombs, my goodness, it's an eerie sound.
Well, the feeling of being bombed. Tell us about that. The helplessness of it.
Yeah, but that's what it is. They're whistling down, and you just hear the whistle, but you don't know how close it is or how far away it is. And you just hold your teeth. You almost bite your teeth in that, waiting for it to strike. But we were fortunate that we didn't lose any men there. But back by headquarters, back about 100 yards back down, where there was a half track there, a couple of fellows dove under the half track to get out of it, and a bomb struck beside the half track and killed the two of them under the half track. Now you talk about the fortunes of war, you know. You think you're safe because you're under this half track, but the shrapnel ricocheted off the thing and killed them both. Yeah, that was the only two casualties we had. And that next night, we were given the task of there was going to be a big push come in. The Fort Garry Horse were now reinforcing already, and they're sitting behind us. A big push is going to come in, but they got to go over this minefield, and we have to lift that minefield. So I was called upon with the crew. There was a full composition. I think there were 38 of us, something like that. 14 to a unit, you know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's divided in three. The one unit, the first unit, went through the minefield. There was a way through it, which we knew, and they went right next to the Germans, and they laid there, you know, as a buffer. And the next crew was the lifting crew. That was me. I was on that. And the next crew was the packaging crew. They put them all back in the cases and stacked them aside. Hmm. And anyway, on the way up to that, when we went up to that, the road went down into a sort of a gully, like it had been shoveled down in. And all of a sudden, while we're doing that, a flare goes up and the shelling starts. And never in my life have I been under shelling like that. For 15 minutes steady, we were being smashed around, and not one of us was hit, but the sides of the banks that are coming down on us and everything else like that. And there was a tank, I remember, burned out tank sitting over in the field, and that's where the officer was, in that tank. But anyway,
He really died.
Yeah, he managed to get out of the shelling.
Oh.
Yeah, but anyway, the shelling was over with, and word came down the line to move on again. And you remember this fellow Cripps I told you that came ashore with me?
Yeah.
He was ahead of me at this time. And I said, okay, Cripps, come on. And he never moved. And I said, are you hit? And he still never moved. And I rolled him over, and he was staring, just frozen. He was stiff as a board. And he stunk to the high heavens. And anyway, I smacked him in the face, and he come around. And he was paralyzed with fear, totally paralyzed. And he had relieved his bowels. And I told him, I said, boys, what are you going to do? He said, well, good God, I can't move like this. Fortunately enough, it was all in one spot. Yeah. And I took out my knife, and I undid his pants, and I took his underwear, and I cut it right off, right across, and pulled it out and threw it away. And
that's a good friend.
I said, the worst
thing. They'll do that for you.
I said, the worst thing that can happen to you now, you go into battle with no underwear on. And she said, don't tell anybody. You know, I never told anybody that story till here about 5 years ago. Yeah, I had never told anybody that story. But the poor lady, he did survive the war too. He had a chunk out of his arse from one action we were in one day. A piece of shrapnel took a chunk out of his arse about that size. But other than that, he did all right. But yeah, he was some worried about being somebody learning that he had shit himself.
Pooped himself.
There you go. Yeah, he had a bowel evacuation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we went on in there and we started to lift these mines. The engineers were with us, and we had cake testers, like, you know, a log rod with a ring on it. Mm-hmm. And he says, there should be a mine right here, Jiggs. So I went down and I found it within about a foot of it. Okay, now he takes his map and he marks, it should be one over that way, 6 feet. So that was 6 feet. We tried, got that one. And once you get the pattern, one to another, you work out pretty good, pretty fast. And you keep passing them back to the other fellows who take them back to the engineer. He pulls the detonator and then puts them in the wooden box, you know what I mean? And the detonators all go in another. And we worked like that for about 2 hours, 3 hours. And during that time, I crawled on 2 Germans. one with the head, only half a head. And when I went and crawled onto him, I put my hand right in the back part of his skull, which was full of water. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so anyway, I checked him, he had a Luger on him, so I was all right.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the other guy had a leg off. And he'd wandered out into the minefield and had a leg off, and they dragged him out of the way. And
So this was our minefield or theirs?
it was our minefield,
Yeah.
but they didn't really know it probably when it first started off. It was there, or somebody wandered out into it. And when he fell onto it. See, what happens sometimes, you step on a mine and it blows you off, and you flop onto another one.
Right.
And, but then that guy that I flopped on, he might have been part of that explosion.
Right.
And, you don't know. But anyway, we got them all out there, and then we laid white tape on the ground, right away along there, to a spot of a section about 30 feet wide that we had free of mines, and all these mines stacked back there. And we made our way back to our lines, and then about, about 5:15, the artillery barrage starts on the other side, and it's moving on into the woods over there. And then about 5:50, all of a sudden the tanks, you hear them revving up. They come down that slope and up that and across that space. Germans never knew what hit them, because they didn't expect them to come over the minefield and get right through it. They didn't know the mines had been lifted during the night. And they smacked right on through them. Got about 5 miles before they had to stop. Yeah, and the front moved. All of a sudden, the front is moving all over the whole works. The Germans are running, and that's the way it works. You win some, you lose some. You make some mistakes, and you learn by your mistakes.
Sure.
But that was the last. That we actually relieved any infantry. We were pulled back now ourselves. We had been doing this for almost 26 days, something like that, and we were getting pretty weary ourselves. And anyway, they pulled us back, and we got reinforcements and filled back in and things like that. I remember one of our sergeants there in this place went berserk. When I say berserk, he had a trench right behind me where I'd got this big door for my trench, and he had a trench right behind that. And he kept digging deeper and digging deeper, He was down 7, 8, 9 feet, and he never wouldn't come out. And I told the officer, I said, Sergeant Mackay is having trouble. I mean, he's talking to me and everything else, but he won't come out of his trench. And so he went up to see him, and he went down in the trench with him. And they finally had to sedate him to get him out of the trench. Yeah, he was a big policeman from Toronto, could stand on a street corner or an intersection with 10 guys and pound the stuffings out of the works, tough as nails. But when it come to shelling, he just couldn't hack it. Got him out of there and got him back, and he was reposted and one thing and another, and put in as a battle fatigue and things like that. There's some fellas just can't hack it. Of course, none of us can hack it, but are you scared? No, you're frightened right to death.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, it was one of those things. But we were pulled back out of that, and we refitted and got our vehicles back again, and got all ammunition and everything else that gassed up, ready to move. And right now they're organizing this unit called Totalize, and that was a big armored push that was going south towards Falaise, and we were in on that, and we were all organizing. It was one of those things where we were advancing in the dark with all dust around it and smoke and everything, and there's tracers going over our head. And these tracers are on the targets we're supposed to advance to, and some of the fellas that were firing got mixed up in the targets and all. You talk about a night of chaos. But we got about 11 miles, and when sun came up, and our major saw that we were that far out ahead, that we were in danger of being cut off. So he organized us all into a square, a hollow square, and we took a square of about a full acre or 2 acres, like that. All the armored cars on the corners and everything else, and our mortars in the center, and our anti-tank guns. And we held out for another day and a half right out there. And they did everything in the world to get us out of it, and never budged us. And they fought through to us, and he got a medal for that quick action of discovering that we were having major purchase. He was the fellow that was on North Bevelin Island when we went out to meet the German commandant on North Bevelin Island, try to get him to give up, and one thing or another. And the German commandant said, "We will fight to the last man." And the Major Porteous says, "Well, where is he?" He said, "Where's Hood? He's the last man. We shoot him first." He said, "You make the big joke. That's not funny." But anyway, they wouldn't give up. But anyway, we moved back, and then we started to plaster them. Yeah, these little comedy things do happen. I tell you, and they're not foolish. You know what I mean? But and you remember them. I had on the front of that armored car there. There was a big white sheet tied on that gun, and I had the gun locked up in the air, and that's where Major Porteous was in a carrier, and I was up there to go with him.
When you say carrier, you mean what?
Bren gun carrier. Yeah, we have 7 of them. That's what makes up a troop. 7 Bren gun carriers, and 2 small armored cars, and 3 9-ton armored cars, and that's the Humber Mark 5, and they had the 37 millimeter on them with a Beza machine gun. And the small armored car had a Bren gun in the turret, open turret, and that's usually a car that was used for running around or for the officer to control out of. And the 7 carriers had 3 men. And the last carrier has a radio, and it has a second officer in it. That's really considered to be our getaway carrier. Should we get a bad ambush, that's the only one that can get away and get us help or something like that. That's 12 vehicles, 3 men, 36 men to the troop, and that's it. No medics, no nothing.
Kind of like a little strike force almost. Eh?
That's what it is. It's a continuous strike force, and it fights on its own. Mm-hmm. If we come on 250 Germans, or something like that, or 300, we figured that about even odds. I mean, we wouldn't want to take advantage of them, And we have done that in 8 or 10 different times. I'll never forget Sergeant Rapin, who was in car 218. And this is south of Dieppe, and we're moving along, and we're kind of lost. And Sergeant Rapin's from Montreal. He spoke French like a trooper. Anyway, he went up to this house to get some information. The house would, we say, maybe 100 feet, 200 feet back from the road. Big veranda on it, farmhouse there. And behind the farmhouse is an open field and a line of trees and a 2-story house, He goes back and just gets to the house when he squats down and runs back, squatted down. Now you try to run 100. I squatted down like that. And he's coming, and when he got there, he's trying to tell us there's Germans, 3 tanks and Germans over there in the woods. Well, what we didn't know at the time was in this house there was 2 sentries in this house, and they were probably just sleeping. Up stop, maybe the officers, we don't know. Mm-hmm. And that'd be the logical place for the officers to be. But anyway, Lieutenant Cowan says, "Well, what about so and so? And we'll take them on, shall we?" "Yes, come on, let's go." Anyway, they all demounted from the carrier section in front of me. Mm-hmm. Our job with the 3 big armored cars is to keep the perimeter going and to knock out these tanks when the fellas isolate them for us, with their bazookas or Piet guns.
Right.
And anyway, we land by the trees, and all the boys are there, and the officer gives the word with the whistle, and all hell starts to pop. And he did get 1 tank, but Corporal Duel was our Piet gun boy, and he was good. But he got one of the tanks right away burning, and I hit the other one with a 37 millimeter. And then I was raking behind the house as the Germans are running all over the place behind it, out on a big open field. And I'm knocking them down like 10 pins in the open field. And anyway, all of a sudden a shot rings out from the house upstairs window. And right where Corporal Dooley has his Piet gun, by this tree, a chunk of barked off the tree. Missed him, mind you, and he swung around with a Piet gun right at on his shoulder. And you're supposed to be laying down with that thing anchored on the ground. And he aimed at that window, right through the window. And the smoke came out around the bottom of the foundation. What a roaches explosion. Don't know what he hit or what happened inside, but windows, doors, and everything.
What caliber would his weapon be?
That's the Piet gun. That's a big bomb about that big around.
Oh,
with
I
fins
see.
on it and everything.
Yeah,
that's able to take out a tank, and the way it's built, it'll bore a hot steel hole right on through 2 inches of armor. If you hit it. But if you hit anything before the armor, it'll just explode. Big explosion.
It's got a Piet gun.
Yeah. If you've ever seen a bridge too far, you'll see that fella trying to get that tank coming down there with his Piet gun,
Yeah. Well, the Germans had their equivalent would have been the Panzerfaust.
Panzerfaust, that's what knocked me out. Panzerfaust. Yeah. That's another story too. That's a comical one. I got out of the armored car, turned it around. We had the bridge. I couldn't go any further. Turned it around, and that's where I am back on. And I swung my gun over the back of the armored car. Mercy standing up in the turret, my loader, And I said to Mercy, I said, I'm down on the gun. I said, geez, I wish I could see something to shoot at. He said, Jiggs, I don't like that window with a mattress over it up there. And just then the Panzerfaust came in the window, like that. And I had my hand on the trigger like that to pull it, and I never got it. The next I remember, I'm standing beside the armored car, wondering how I got there. You don't know in a blast. And I'm standing there with my gun in my hand, my pistol in my hand, and my headset's still on. Now, I don't know if they ever seen the way the headsets are fastened, but brother, you don't yank them. I still had the headsets on, and I threw them off, and it took me, maybe 2 minutes to come to my senses as to where I was and why I was there. Boy, that's it. That Panzerfaust now had a plate on it. Some of them did. They go over the shoulder, and they have a square plate on it. That had a square plate on it. You'll see in the books if you ever see them.
Yeah.
There's different stages. I got pictures of them there. But
We've got pictures that you've given us on your memory stick, and we'll
Yeah.
include them with your story.
I yanked my shoulder out at that time. It was right out of joint, and I made my way back to in the ditch, and I heard the guys, the carriers are in around the house, farmhouse here, and I right by them, and all of a sudden I heard the boys yelling, "Down, Jiggs, get down, Jiggs, get down!" And then the machine guns, our own machine guns, open up, and I looked behind me over my shoulder in the ditch, and here's 2 Germans bouncing in the air. They were following me back in.
Oh, boy.
Or they were sneaky buggers. And I guess they had to be, cope with that. But I made my way in around the farmhouse. There was a big pucas hay there, half the size of this room. And the carrier sat there in the house. And Corporal Redhead said, "Jiggs, where'd he get you from?" I said, "That window there with the mattress on it." So he had a 50 caliber Browning mounted on the carrier. And that wasn't regulation equipment. We still stole them off the tanks. But and welded them on too. But then we couldn't get ammunition, but we had to buy the ammunition from the Americans with so many Lugers.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
We had this internal economy going.
Yeah.
But anyway, he started to ring the window, and the window fell right out. And when the window fell out, it was a brick house. When you ring it like that, and the window fell out, here's a German still in the room. And he making for the door. I don't know if they ever made it or not. But anyway, just at that minute, another one of these Panzerfausts struck the haystack right next to us. And I went again for another 50 feet. Now, I didn't get the blast this time. I just got bowled over. And when I got bowled over, I landed on my shoulder and popped it right back in again. But anyway, Redhead was laying on the ground, screaming and screaming, "I don't want to die, I don't want to die," and all this, And I crawled over to him, and one thing and another, and I smacked him in the mouth, to bring him to. And oh boy, he detected most of the blast. And then I looked at him, and he had a piece of shrapnel had cut off all the veins, and veins and tendons in his hand here. So I bandaged him up. And then I yelled to Scotty, who was the driver of the carrier. And I said, "Scotty, can you get that damn thing going?" He says, "I got to find it first." He pawed down to the controls and turned it, and it worked. And he backed out, looked just like a mobile haystack. Well, 90% of the hay that was on that stack was now on the carrier. We threw half of it off, and I pushed Redhead up onto it, Corporal Redhead up on it, and I jumped off on it. And we made it out to the road and down the road and left the armored car burning. And that was comical too. There was two Daimlers with us this day, new cars, and they were 2-pounders, 40 millimeters on it, but no ammunition yet. And what the hell good?
Useless.
Yeah, and they were sitting behind, and they couldn't fire the machine guns because the 2 guys behind me didn't care, never cleaned their guns or anything like that. And the guns have what they call cosmoline on them when they come from the artificer, and that's this cosmoline is a jelly like that's on them, preserves them, and they had never been cleaned. And they fire at them and they go, yeah. But anyway.
So, just going back on the point you just made, there was a lot of alterations made to all kinds of vehicles. And
oh yes. And do you know some of those alterations became standard procedure afterwards? The carrier section now and the Jeeps now have 50 calibers mounted on them as part of their thing.
Oh, is that right?
They discovered that the 50 caliber is one of the quickest, one of the most beautiful weapons for actually cleaning up things. I mean, they could take out just about anything. Have I got one? Yes. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, that's good. That took the rust off the throat. Yeah, it's amazing how they've adapted vehicles to a thing. You take even to the wintertime. We discovered that keeping pajamas on underneath your battle dress loose pajamas was better than long underwear.
Huh.
We had polo pajamas types, and when the war was over and they were doing northern exercises, that was standard equipment now.
Huh.
You don't use underwear anymore. You use polo pajamas,
Huh.
because that's you have that second layer of cloth, but it's loose cloth.
Mm-hmm.
And the Eskimos had known that for years.
Mhm.
They never wore anything tight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing how they and of course you adapt. That's the name of the game. Innovated and adapt. And we did a lot of stuff to. We found out that the Panzerfaust, if it touches anything at all, the same thing with our Piat. If it touches anything at all, it explodes. So we hung everything on the outside of our armoured car. They looked like gypsy caravans with tin cans hanging on them. We'd get chicken wire, hang on the outside of it, and going down the road, if they fired at us with a Panzerfaust, it blew off the chicken wire. But that was the end of it.
So a form of armor for you was chicken wire.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, the big tanks used to do the same thing. They weld extra tracks on them, but the extra track was loose on the side and things like that. And you'll see some of them with tracks across
Yes, I've seen
another
it,
line
yeah.
of tracks down the side.
Yeah.
That was all because of the Panzerfaust.
Ah,
They take care of it. Yeah,
amazing.
you got to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. They even have the newer ones now. The newer tanks are made with an extra plate 1 inch away from the other one, welded on.
Oh.
There's this inch gap there,
Right.
and the Panzerfaust can hit that any time at all,
Yeah.
and it don't penetrate any farther. Blow a hole in that, but that's it.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So
You
that-
learn.
So you get through that battle we're talking about there.
Yeah, that was that little one just south of Dieppe there. Yeah, we ended up at 2 or 3 different times on ambushes like that. You know, one ambush that we got caught in ourselves was just before what they called the Porte de Lyon. We had joined up with the Americans at Falaise, and the battle for Normandy was now finished. That from Normandy down to Falaise was considered the Normandy battle.
Uh-huh.
And once that Falaise was gone, now we got orders to turn left and come on up, and our job is to get to the coast and cut off everything from Dieppe to the left, and that takes that one big chunk out. And they got the German 19th Army, I think, penned up down in the Falaise, and if you could have seen the pictures of it, and the stink and the smell and the stench of dead horses and dead bodies and burned out vehicles. Oh my God. I often wondered when I'm thinking back to the days when I'm finally out of this war, will that smell ever leave me? And it doesn't. It doesn't leave you. You know it. And so many dead bodies. Pictures of it where they strafed the full columns of escaping Germans. Right, they're full column, maybe 3, 4, 5 miles long. Nothing but vehicles and men. And the pilots used to say, Jiggs up there, we're only flying at about 1,000 feet. We can smell the smell up here.
Oh.
Can you imagine smelling it in the airplane?
1,000 feet up.
Yeah. But anyway, we turned left there and came up the sort of like the rivers, and we liberated a town called Orbec. And we fought our way. Had the bridge under. The Germans were shelling the bridge, and the infantry tried 3 or 4 times to get across. Couldn't make it. Anyway, we were there with the armored cars, and we said we'll make it. And anyway, we waited until the shelling lulled. They got to stop so far every once in a while to get the shells up and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
And we made it right across the bridge quickly, the whole troop, right up into the middle part of Dieppe. We fanned out left and fanned out right, and one thing another, and we had the town in the town square. We had them on, and the Germans were coming out of windows and everything else, and the resistance fellows made themselves known to us right away. Mm-hmm. And up in the back of my armored car, I had a bundle of weapons, pistols and machine guns and rifles, German, Canadian, you name it. Yeah. And I immediately undo them and give them out to these resistance fellows. Uh-huh. And of course they'd have a rifle, and they'd head for the nearest house where the Germans were. Up the stairs with the rifle, not cocked, not aimed. They had a rifle, didn't matter. I'm a soldier now. Grab the German with a scruff of the neck and kick him downstairs. It was priceless to watch it going on. But anyway, I handed one rifle down over to a fellow, and he had it pointed at the ground. And he pulled the trigger, and it was loaded. Oh. He shot himself in the foot, right in the instep. And he'd been a soldier for about 27 seconds.
Oh. Well, he was wounded in action, though.
Yeah, wounded in action. But anyway, and just an addendum to that, I went back to that police in Orbec in 1998. And I asked the mayor, I told him about I know he was tickled pink to see, and they shut the town down. just like that. And they took them the big table, the mayor's table, you know, the big council table, and it was all placed over with hors d'oeuvres and bottles of this and bottles of that, and we're chatting away, and I happened to mention this fellow that shot himself in the foot, and and they said, that didn't he work for the council as a clerk, and so many years? Yeah, that's him. He retired last year. Anyway, that was it. We were going on, and they were toasting this and toasting that, and to this and all that. And I said, that fellow that I mentioned about that shot himself, I said, did you get a touch? Oh, yes, he's standing right next to you. You know, I looked around. I said, no. And the guy they had talked to, he didn't speak one word of English, but he had a grin on his face about 7 miles wide. And his name was Andre Cusi. And anyway, I said, I don't believe it. So he put his foot, took his shoe up and put his foot up on the council table, and he could see where the bullet had gone right in instep and come out the arch. Oh, and one thing and another. And I said, I'm sorry. And I reached over and kissed it. And there was a blooming photographer there, snapped the picture.
Oh, jeez.
And it was in the next week's newspaper. All is forgiven.
Oh.
Well, and they sent me a copy of this paper. I didn't get it till about a month later. I got a brown envelope in the mail, and they sent it to me. But, you know, these little things that happen, you know. But he has I went back there a second time, and he has a niece who speaks 6 languages and is an interpreter for agricultural machinery people. Oh. When Norway makes a machine that's sold into the States, she interprets all the equipment stuff and all into English.
Right.
Or if it's going to Russia, she interprets it, the Norwegian into Russian. Boy, oh boy, what a cookie. Yeah. And a lovely woman. She stayed with me all the time, right next to me. Yeah. She was his niece. Oh. And he didn't speak English, but he was laughing.
You're famous there. Oh,
yeah,
gee.
Yeah. But,
so now you mentioned Dieppe. Can we get into that now? And they're going.
Yeah,
into
that we're fighting our way up to Orbeck there and one thing or another. And we had a second officer who had came ashore with us. When we came ashore, it was Lieutenant Cowens and Lieutenant Anderson. He was the second officer. But now he had been moved out of there and went into the second troop, number 2 troop. And he was handling that now, and because we were getting short of officers. But anyway, just outside Orbeck, as we were moving on, we came onto a German Tiger tank, and the infantry wanted to take out the tank, but they couldn't distract the tank enough to do it. So they told him in his armored car, and he was in 2 troop, like I said. And the day before, he had got his arm caught in the recoil, loading the gun. The gun had gone off when and got his arm caught in it, and he could still work. He could still fire the gun. So he insisted that he get from loading over to firing the guns, and he was firing guns. And the infantry officer that wanted to take out the tank with a Piat gun, and wanted him to distract the tank to get up in some place where he could fire at it a couple of shots to bring the tank to chasing him, and that's what he did. And he didn't do it fast enough, and the German did fire at him, and the shell went right on through the armored car and just took him right in the guts and killed him right then and there. But the infantry fella did get the Piat gun, and they did knock the tank out. So, you know, one.
You got his job done anyway.
Yeah, oh yes, I got the job done. 5 men gone, tank gone, and the front moves on, and you have a dead officer. So you know that's. But we moved out from that. I guess we moved up from that to El Bouf. Mm-hmm. And just before El Bouf, we were up in the hills, and we came down out of a wood road. And this morning we had come onto a big concrete, you know, the air base down there, a unit like that. We come onto that, and it was all black smudges here and in the center of it, there's a big hole down, stairway down the hole, and we threw a couple of grenades down there to make sure there was nothing down there. We did take 1 prisoner, but that was it. But anyway, down in that area there, we took that prisoner with us, and we went on down this little wood road, and this wood road intersected a pavement, and at that same intersection by the pavement, there was a tram line come across the road also. These small tram lines run through the countryside a lot, you know, so it's like a commuter type things. But anyway, there was a little house there, little shack there, and there was mines laying on the ground there. Now, this day, we had a new officer, brand new spanking officer, and that's bad. We can operate without an officer. We know what we're doing, you know.
And he replaced.
You know, this man
was he the replacement for the killed?
No, well, I don't know. Cowens probably had gone on a course or something like that. Sometimes they give him 2 days of a course or something. But anyway, in his place was Lieutenant Ralston. During training in England, Lieutenant Ralston was known as Mr. Recce. He never did anything wrong. He won all the contests and everything else. And I don't know whether you ever heard of this Colonel J. Ralston, who was Minister of Defence during the war there. He often became quite a thing, but it was his nephew. But anyway, he was our officer. Never had action, but had never been in action before. And as we came down out of this dirt road, the small armoured car was ahead of me, with the open turret. He moved out onto the pavement road, and there on the pavement was a series of 3 planks with 3 mines on each plank. You know, you can pull them off and move them on. And stupid, like, you don't go near mines because mines are there for a reason, you know. Anyway, the officer, he's tickled pink. He's going to move these mines out of the way. Him and Corporal Kwame and Sergeant Bateman move up to the mines. And Kwame leans over the mines. I'm sitting there now. I'm not on. I'm not on the pavement yet. I'm looking. I can't see anybody. And anyway, Ralston is standing right behind Kwame. Kwame leans over the mines, just going to move him, and a shot rang out. And the shot took Kwame right in the shoulder here and came out down the other hip here. And the blood spattered all over Ralston. Ralston freaked right out, ran for the woods here behind me in the armoured car, was over behind the tree crying, literal big tears coming down. He said, crying on. He said, and tell him to stop. Tell him to stop. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. Tell him to stop. You know, like this. And we're working on Kwame, trying to get him the hell out of there. And then Samuels was in this small armoured car, who Sergeant Bateman was the crew commander. Samuels is the driver. He starts yelling at me to get the hell out of the way. Commander's been hit. And of course, Commander's in the turret, an open turret. And a bullet had come in and ticked the little blade on the edge of the turret. Took him right between the eyes. And of course, he's just dead. That's it. And he was one of my personal friends. But anyway, and Samuels is yelling at me to get the hell out of the way. Now, how do you move a 9-ton armoured car in a little dirt road out of the way? But the panic of the moment, where we should have had an officer directing us, and I was left with 3 headsets to try to direct this troop back and get the guys behind me to move back and get, you know, this, oh my geez, what chaos. And you know, you had 3 headsets trying to take one off, use the B set, use the A set, you know, and try to get the hell back. I got them all back, got it out of it. And for some stunned, stupid reason, I run up to Samuel's car, got to Clement's body, and brought it back and threw it up in the back of my armoured car. Now, what the hell I wanted that for? But the stupid stuff you do in the heat of action. I got back in the armoured car, and there was a son of a bitch of a sniper trying to get me. And I count 5 every time the bullet would hit the target, and pop my head out, and then back in. And it would hit again.
Please don't look over there. Look at the camera.
There were 7 bullet marks on the top of my turret, gouges, and they stayed there for about 4 months till I got a new armoured car. But they were right on top of the armoured car. And if there had been 2 snipers there, I'd have been dead meat because the second guy would have just waited. But
snipers are a big problem a lot of times, really.
But snipers like that, oh yes, you get two guys in an armoured car, you pop out and then come in and then pop out again, and the second guy is waiting for you. Yeah. But anyway, there was a little vein on top of the armoured car, a little piece of metal, and it's what they call a sighting vein. That lines up the tip of my gun. If I got a target, I can line that up like that, then get down on my scope. I'm in a relative place. And one of the bullets had gone right through that. Looked like it had come from the factory that way. Looked like a duck tail. You know.
So you had a little peep sight.
Yeah. But anyway, we were there for almost 20 minutes trying to fight it out. And never once did anything but rifle fire come near us. The rifle fire had killed Kwame. The rifle fire had killed Clement. And, you know, and the rifle fire had been fired at me. But no machine gun, no nothing, no artillery, no nothing. We got back up the road. There was a bulge in the road where they had loaded wood or something like that, and we got the 3 armoured cars turned around, but the carriers had already gone on. So we got everything back up the road, back to this big spot where we were, and at that spot there, I unloaded Clement, and that fellow that was in the last carrier with the other officer, spotted Clement, and he was a friend of him too, and he freaked out. He grabbed his Thompson machine gun and was going to kill the officer, the little coward. You're talking about pure chaos. Another sergeant grabs him and puts him down, and they took the officer. Now the officer's still bibbering, crying like hell, and they put him in a carrier and gave him a shot of morphine. It's the only way to slow him, and they may have to tie him up, but they didn't. But anyway, he's just freaked right out. But anyway, I said to the fellows, I said to the sergeant, I said, do you realize that, you know, we were never fired upon except for rifle fire? And I said, you know what we do to mines? We can usually glow mines. We fire the machine guns down to the mines, and they don't explode. They just catch fire, and they just, that's all. And so I said, look, we just take the 3 armored cars and go on down there. And I mean, we'll take a carrier with us and hold that spot, and we'll go down into that little village that's down there and clean the clock. And we did. Did we ever? We come roaring down. We did stood back from the thing, and we fired at the mines and had them all burning, and one thing and another. And when we thought they were burned far enough out, we nailed and drove right across them. And the carrier, by the way, when we were gone, the carrier got out and moved them off the road, the burning mine. But anyway, we got out, and as we went down that town there was Germans popping their heads out of it, and with their gone out, falling out of the windows like dolls. And there was a couple of sheds down there with up, and it was an anti-aircraft unit that's retiring. That they had been on this unit where the big concrete pad was. They were the support unit for that were firing the V2s over to England. That's where they fired them, from this big pad up and over. We figured it was V2s, but it could have been the V1s, you know. But that was another one that wouldn't bother England anyway. But anyway, we went down that town with the guns firing, and one thing another, right down. And the last building down there was a kind of like their headquarters, and there was a big swastika hanging on a big plate glass window. You should have seen that when it went off. Oh, that was cute. That was a big staff car outside of it too. I had it burning. Turned around down there and started back up. And Mercy's trying to load my guns, keep them all loaded up for me. And as we get up there, there's a fellow with a Panzerfaust steps out of one of these garages, going to take me on, you know. And as I go by, and I grab the machine gun, there's nothing in the machine gun. But the 37's got one, so I hit him with the 37. And I must have hit this Panzerfaust right on, because the whole front of the building disappeared completely. Just the whole building and all came down. And we got back up to where the carrier was. Carrier came out on the road. We went back out. We had 3 houses burning, 3 cars burning. And now we feel a little better. You know, it's what do you call it, payback? But anyway, we finally got back, and we took the officer back and one thing or another. And our next shift from that, we lost 2 men that killed that day. Kwame didn't die till the next day, just same, for all that big wound he had. But the next move was we're up in Elbouf, about, I don't know if you know the countryside there. There's a huge big cliff there, what they call Elbouf, and it's a big V bluff is what it's called, and it's right by the rivers down below. But when you're up here in this Elbouf, you can look out over the countryside, see for 20 miles. Yeah, but they. Do you need a? Oh, I thought you needed a knife.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we got the Elbouf, and we're going to cross over the river there on a bridge, Bailey Bridge. But the American Second Army was north of us, and they're kind of trying to cross over at the same time. 2 armies now trying to cross over the same river on one bridge. So you've never seen such chaos in your life. But anyway, we're parked along there, and there's a couple of those strange houses there too that the fellas are using.
We'll just put it that way.
Anyway, and I happened to down there and went down by the river itself, and here's a German body laying in the water there. So I had the shovel with me, and I said I'll pull him out of that now, and I'll bury him there, and one thing or another, you know. And I dug a hole for him, and then I started to pull him out, and his arm came off on me. It not came off, it came off like a glove. All the flesh came off. My supper from yesterday and the day before came up.
You looked at your last
oh
meal.
boy, I went back up so much for my good deed today. But anyway, yeah, there's another part of the hardening process. But we got across there, and once we got across there, then we turned left, and we're heading up. And that's when we started working our way towards Rouen, and that's when we had been out to Rouen on the 27th, I think it was, and we had seen the road to Rouen, and we knew the bridge was blown, but we didn't know how bad. And on we came back out on the 29th, I guess it was, and we got right to the river of Rouen. And you know, just before on the 27th, I think we lost Clement and Kwame on the 26th, and on the 27th we were on our way out to Rouen again. And on the way out through there, just before that, we'd lost so many men. They were shifting things around in the troop, and of course I was in the big armed car, and I was the gunner for Cowan, and and the officers thought the world of me because there was no bullshit around me. I didn't drink and I had no other alternative. You know what I mean? If I was a radio operator, I was a West Best on a gun that was there. If there was gunning, it was the same thing. And I used to bug them for extra shells at night and go out firing someplace, just to keep. And I'd have everything right tuned right up. If I was going to stay alive, it was going to be because I did something. But anyway, the Corporal Pettigrew came to me and he said, "Jiggs," he said, "you'll be my gunner now." He said, "up in that car, in the small armoured car." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, well, that's the way we want it. The officer wants it. I suppose that's all I can do about it." So anyway, he gave me all kinds of lectures about, well, don't get excited in action. Just be cool, he said, and I'll direct you, and we'll get through this all right. And I knew him from England, where I used to play a little casino, big casino with him all the time. He used to take more tanners off me, 10 cents or whatever you call them, 10 pence. And anyway, and I liked him, he's a nice fellow. But anyway, it never did happen. And it ended up somebody else went up there and he was the crew commander of this particular car, small armoured car, was ahead of us. And we're out on a couple of woods roads. The countryside is all big forests and all that, planted forest, and we're moving along. And a shot rang out from someplace. We don't know whether it hit his car or not. And he out of the car, screaming at the top of his lungs, "I don't want to die," and running down the road. And his car left sitting up there. And I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And one of the guys in the garage section reached out and grabbed him, clocked him, and put him in the car, and you tie him up. And you even gag him if you have to, But you tie him up. I mean, you've got to keep, man, we can't stop what we're doing. He's got to go with us. He'd be down in the carry well, might be there all day.
So that actually happened?
Yeah. But you have to do that. I mean, we know we have to do it, and we know somebody's going to break now and again. But he was supposed to be so good and all of that, and had everything organized, and he just freaked right out. But anyway, they moved somebody else up into his position there, I don't know who it was, to take the armoured car for the rest of the day. But that day there, we came back about 4 o'clock, and they turned him over to the medics and one thing and another, and he was shaking and bibbering. I think they gave him a shot of morphine halfway through the day to kind of settle him down, but things like that happen. But some guys can hack it and some guys can't. It's as simple as that, I don't know whether you can condemn them for it or whether it's just the way they treat it with their mind. They want to dwell on it or something like that, but I never dwelled on anything, I had accidents where I shot 14 civilians one day. I had another accident where I killed a German's wife and 2 young kids, 2 young girls. And what do you do about it? You bury them. You say sorry, and that's it.
Move on.
Fortune's over. But anyway, the following day we made it to up there, and on the way back from the river that runs by Rouen, we didn't get to the crossing yet, but on the way back, a couple of our airplanes, Typhoons, spotted us, and they thought we were German. Well, so down they come, and we have what we call identification aprons. They're a piece of oilcloth, about 2 foot wide and about 15, 16 feet long, and you roll it right out onto the road quickly. And we rolled it out on the road right behind me, and one of the fellas did, and the machine gun bullets took the corner of it off. I tell you, you talk about close. But anyway, and that fella, by the way, died. That fella that when he took the corner of it off, a piece of the shell of the thing or whatever got in his arm, and he died 3 days later of blood poisoning. Now that's something very strange to happen with our medical advancement. It just should never have happened, but it did. It's just one of those freaks of things. But it happened. But we still had that apron there with a piece cut off it the longest time. But anyway, the following day, I suppose the 29th, something like that. I guess it was the 30th, 31st. Well, we did finally hit Rouen.
Of what now? What month was it?
August.
August. Of 44.
But there's another day in there too where we came up to a crossroad. Oh yes, on the 29th we came up to a crossroads, and I had grown up in the States of camp meetings and all that. Every summer we'd go to the camp meeting and there'd be a cross up in the tree and things like that. And as we came to this crossroad, there's a cross up in the tree, and that's the only thing was going through my mind, that we must come into some sort of a religious organization or something like that. But here in the corner where this intersection was, there was quite a mess of garbage, like, a couple extra tires and pieces of a fender, stuff like that, where a unit had moved out fast. But anyway, the officer Oh, we had a new officer, yeah, just came back. He had been wounded and he had healed up. His name was Lieutenant Owens. And he was with us. And he'd only been back with us a day and a half. And anyway, my loader, my Mercy there, that fellow there, he got out with him, and another fellow got out and started looking around this stuff. And there was some papers there and things like that. And they picked them up. And all of a sudden, down come the artillery on us. And oh boy, we were zeroed right in on it. And of course, when the coup commander is out of the armoured car, it's my responsibility to preserve that armoured car. That's the rules. Anyway, I immediately backed down the road about 100 yards quickly. And all of a sudden, I reported back to headquarters again, and they're right down there on me again, the shells are. And I said, they got me radiolocated, and that blowing thing up in the tree there is what they're using for it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I whipped down the road at about another 100 yards, and I have a special frequency. I flick over on the thing there, and switch off, switch on to another frequency. Then I tell them we went on radio silence for so long, and one thing another, and that would be back. So, and the shelling stopped. And I immediately then moved back up and picked up Lieutenant Cowens and Mercy and the rest of them. But when I got up there, Lieutenant Cowens was wounded again. And now the shells that struck, everybody else had made it into the ditch and a dive. And I remember seeing him halfway in the air. And he hit, and he was only a foot off the ground where the other guys were already in the ground. Just that split second there, and he's wounded a second time, just like that. And Mercy started giving me stuffings for leaving him up there, and he was going to charge me and going to have me up in court. And they did that. They put me up on charge, and the officer said he did exactly what he was supposed to do, the right way. That's it. And, you know, it's his job to preserve that car. He preserved it. He preserved you. He didn't do anybody any harm, and one thing another. But anyway,
okay. Now, pause for a second. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's the problem with these cameras.